From stories across the globe to stories here at home, this is the National News Broadcast. A very good evening to you. I'm Sharifa Tahir.
A very good evening to you. I am Dishan Veerakon, and for starters, let's take a look at the top stories for tonight. The Director General of Health Services states that the COVID-19 infected patient from the Suduvella area in Jayala has not suffered a relapse of the disease. Quarantine lifted in many areas. Attempts made by 9 suspects to escape from the Mahara prison fail. One suspect dies after falling down from the prison wall. The Prime Minister states at this moment attention needs to be focused on controlling the coronavirus and not on politics. The caretaker of a location where the Easter Sunday bombers propagated extremist views arrested. The free distribution of environment-friendly fertilizer for paddy farmers gets underway successfully. The Vesak week begins tomorrow. A group of Sri Lankans arrive in the island from London. Now moving on into those and other stories in detail. Now the caretaker of a centre at which individuals who associated with the National Tawheed Jamaat and were exposed to extremist views was arrested this evening. In the preliminary investigation, it was revealed that the Easter Sunday bombers who had also visited the location to propagate extremist ideologies. Now, as part of the investigations into the Easter Sunday attacks, as a team of CID officers raided this location, which is situated at the Madurankuliya area in Puttalam. The centre had been maintained under the name of a non-governmental organisation. The CID states that the arrestee had functioned as the caretaker of the so-called non-governmental organisation and training centre. Meanwhile, religious observances now took place before the historic Jayasri Ma Bohodiya at Anuradhapura to invoke merits on the country and its people. Now, the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was also present in this moment. Now, upon arriving at the Anuradhapura sacred site, the President met with Atamastanadipati Venerable Dr. Palle Gamma Sirinivasa Thera and obtained blessings. The President also attended the milk rice puja that was conducted before the Ruwan Valley Mahasaya this morning to invoke blessings on the country and its people. The chanting of Set Piris also took place. The President also called on Chief Incumbent of the Ruwan Valley Mahasaya, Venerable Palle Gamma Hema Ratanathera, and engaged in a cordial discussion. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa thereafter arrived at the Minisavatiya Rajamahawihare and met with the Chief Incumbent Venerable Ithala Vatunuvave Yanathilaka Thera. The President educated the Thera on the measures taken by the government to contain the spread of the coronavirus. In response, the Thera said the entire Mahasangha imparts its blessings on the program. The President also visited the Anuradhapura Sri Sambuddha Jayanti Vihara and met with Chief Incumbent Venerable Nugethanne Panyananda Thera and obtained blessings. In the meantime, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa says discussing politics and elections should be set aside fully and attention should be focused on controlling the spread of the coronavirus and restoring normalcy to public life. Issuing a release, the Premier states at this moment the President and the government are fully focused on the measures to control the coronavirus. The Premier states the people have been able to benefit from the outcome of the plan implemented by the government. The opposition states that in the wake of a national disaster situation, the dissolved parliament should be reconvened as after the 30th of April, the government does not have legal powers to allocate funds for the corona control program and to maintain government services. The opposition was also seen arguing that if the old parliament is not reconvened, properties can be confiscated by the state. Last March, when Parliament was dissolved, there were no corona-infected Sri Lankan persons in the country. The first Sri Lankan COVID-19 infected patient was reported after 1.5 weeks. Therefore, the Elections Commission postponed the election until the 20th of June. However, depending on the recommendations of health officials, the election can most probably be postponed further. In the release issued by the Premier, it states that the Elections Commission, upon the powers it is vested, will hold the elections at the appropriate moment. The COVID-19 controlling project in Sri Lanka has reported much success compared to other countries. Therefore, if an election is held, it will be disadvantageous to the opposition. The Premier points out this is why the opposition is attempting to convene the old Parliament to obstruct the allocation of funds of the government with the intention of sabotaging the Corona Control Project and thereby discredit the government. The Premier in his release also calls to mind how the parties of the former good governance regime acted in Parliament to obstruct payments for fertilizer and pharmaceutical suppliers of the government last February. The Premier accuses them of attempting to discredit the government. Now they put forward an argument that under Clause 3 of Article 150 of the Constitution, after the dissolution of Parliament, the President receives the powers to spend funds to maintain the services of the country only if the government that was in office before dissolution had not passed an appropriation bill. The Premier opines that this argument does not make sense, as under Clause 3 of Article 150 of the Constitution, after Parliament is dissolved, the President has the powers to allocate monies for any purpose for which Parliament has not made allocations. The opposition raises an allegation that the President is not reconvening the old Parliament with the intention of misusing foreign aid received for the control of the coronavirus. The opposition states Parliament needs to be reconvened to monitor the manner in which such monies are spent. The Premier in his release states all monies received by foreign sources are directed to the Treasury through the relevant network at the central bank, and such monies need to be spent according to a specific procedure. The Premier states the funds held at the Treasury cannot be spent in the way the good governance ministers spend the monies of the Central Cultural Fund. Premier Rajapaksa states once the new parliament is convened, the opposition will get the opportunity to question the manner in which funds were utilized from the date the old parliament was dissolved until the date the new parliament was convened. Until then, the Premier calls on the opposition to refrain from voicing false statements before the public. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa wishes speedy recovery to all COVID-19 infected Navy personnel. He says the risk undertaken by healthcare workers, the Triforces, the police and those who are at the forefront of the battle is clear to the public. In the release, the Premier emphasizes that everyone should render their fullest support to these heroes to assist them in their duties. Meanwhile, curfew will be lifted in 2 districts at 5 a.m. tomorrow and be reimposed at 8 p.m. The imposed curfew in high-risk areas will be in place. Now, further curfew was enforced throughout the island today. The government states restoring organizational activities and day-to-day public life will begin on the 11th of this month. Steps have been taken to continue with organizational and public life activities whilst curfew is in place in high-risk areas. The government imposed curfew in a bid to control the spread of the coronavirus, and the high-risk areas that were identified were the Colombo, Gampaha, Kalutara and Puttalam districts. Therefore, curfew will be in place in these districts. In the other districts, curfew that was enforced from 8 p.m. on the 30th of April will be in place until 5 a.m. tomorrow. Except for the high-risk districts, curfew in the other 21 districts will be in place until the 6th of May from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. the following day. In those districts, curfew which will be reimposed at 8 p.m. on the 6th of May will be enforced until 5 a.m. on the 11th of May. Thereby, curfew will be enforced from 8 p.m. on the 6th of May until 5 a.m. on the 11th of May island-wide. DIG Ajit Rohan says in areas in which curfew will be lifted tomorrow, the police will be patrolling in uniform and civils. Therefore, it is mandatory for the public to adhere to quarantine regulations.
පුලී රථයක් භාවිතා කිරීමේදී සෑම විටම ඒ රථයට ගොඩවීමේදීත් රථයෙන් නැවත ඉවත් වීමේදීත් නිරෝධායන ප්‍රතිපත්ති අනුගමනය කරන්න. ඒ වගේම නිරෝධායන ඇඳිරි නීතිය ඉවත් කරන ප්‍රදේශවල ජනතාවගෙන් අපි ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා රැකියා කරන අයට ඒ රැකියාවල නිරත වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ස්වයං රැකියා කරන අයට ඒ වගේම කෘෂි කර්මාන්තයේ යෙදෙන අයට ඒ රැකියාවල නිරත වෙන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් අනෙක් සියලු දෙනාගෙන් අපි ආයාචනය කරනවා නිවසේ රැඳී සිටින ඔබට ආහාර හෝ ඖෂධ පිළිබඳ අවශ්‍යතාවයක් නැත්නම් නිකරුණේ නගරයට එන්නට එහෙම නැත්නම් පාරවල් වල ගමන් කරන්නට එපා. විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ තීරණාත්මක අවධියක අපි පසු වෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා ඔබේ සහාය අපිට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය වෙනවා මෙම තීරණාත්මක අවධියේදී කටයුතු කිරීම සඳහා.
The public are discouraged from unnecessarily stepping out onto the roads or gathering at various places in crowds. Passenger transportation in trains and CTB buses have been restricted only for those heading for work. Except for those who necessarily have to report to work, others are advised to remain at home and support the efforts to control the COVID-19 spread. Individuals should exit their homes only for the purpose of purchasing essential commodities such as food items or pharmaceuticals. Whenever outdoors, the public must adhere to health guidelines laid down to control the COVID-19. The curfew permits issued by the police will be valid for motorists and their passengers only if they are wearing face masks.
Legal experts point out that the Constitution contains no article on reconvening the dissolved Parliament when the general election has been postponed. They further state that the President is able to allocate monies from the Consolidated Fund to meet the expenses of maintaining public services, and should there be any issue pertaining to the expenditures, an inquiry can be conducted when a new Parliament is convened. President's Counsel Myra Gunavansha says when the date for the new Parliament to sit after the general elections has been declared, if the Parliament does not sit, the notification on the first sitting of Parliament becomes a void. The President's Counsel notes former MP M.A. Sumandiran puts forward an argument that therefore Parliament has the power to reconvene. President's Counsel Gunavansha says such logic is based on hypothetical aspects and not on constitutional aspects. He further states constitutionally there is no mentioning of any such article becoming void or ineffective. As an example, he points out Clause 7 of Article 70 of the Constitution, which states that the dissolved Parliament can be reconvened only if the President is satisfied that a natural emergency situation has arisen and it warrants the reconvening of the dissolved Parliament. The President's Counsel states in this article there is no mentioning that a convening of the House can take place if the new Parliament does not sit on the stipulated date. He further states thereby under Clause 7 of Article 70 of the Constitution, clear discretionary powers lie with the President. President's Counsel U.R. De Silva says the legislator who compiles the Constitution had taken into consideration a situation in which a budget has not been passed or in which monies have not been allocated by Parliament, and therefore has incorporated Clause 3 of Article 150 into the Constitution in order to facilitate a sitting President with a procedure to maintain the services of the country without difficulty. The President's Counsel states the article clearly empowers the President to allocate monies from the Consolidated Fund for a time period of 3 months is the date on which the President has deemed that the Parliament should sit. President's Counsel De Silva also says under Clause number 3 of Article 150 of the Constitution, it does not state that monies allocated for government expenditure can be utilized for election expenses. The President's Counsel further states if Parliament has not set aside allocations to cover election expenses, in such a situation the Elections Commission can be negotiated with, and as per Clause 4 of Article 150 of the Constitution, the President is empowered to obtain the required monies from the Consolidated Fund. President's Counsel U.R. De Silva says at this juncture, the Parliament cannot act to inquire into whether the allocation of monies is right or wrong or for what purpose the monies were utilized. The President's Counsel says if required, it needs to be inquired into when a new Parliament is convened. He further states that the function of the Auditor General is to inquire into such matters as it is the Auditor General who is omnipotent when it comes to such investigations. President's Counsel U.R. De Silva states it is of no use of anyone to voice baseless statements before the media because under the legal provisions vested with the President, funds have currently been obtained to cover expenditure incurring from the 6th of March to the 31st of May.
Now in more local stories, the chief prelates of the Tri-sects have requested the Buddhist community in the country to commemorate Vesak festivities, limiting to their residences amid the coronavirus pandemic in the country. The chief prelates have made these remarks while issuing a message for the Vesak festival. As declared by the government, the Vesak week set to commence tomorrow. The government has requested the public to engage in Vesak festivities of this year while adhering to health instructions. Programs including almsgivings and meditation programs in all temples and other outside locations in the country, as well as pandals and other relevant programs should not be organized considering the prevailing situation in the country. The festivities of the Vesak full moon should be carried out in their residences while engaging in Pratipatti Puja. In the message issued by the chief prelates of the Tri-sects, have urged the Buddhist devotees to evoke the absolute sacred qualities and characteristics of Lord Buddha while developing good and positive thoughts in the minds by following his teachings.
Director General of Health Services Consultant Dr. Anil Jasinghe says the COVID-19 infected person from the Sudhavalla area in Jailo has not suffered a relapse of the disease. Meanwhile, quarantine was lifted in many areas which include Imamul Aruz Mawata at Maradana, Akurana, Kandy, Beruala, Panila and China Fort. As of today, the number of fully recovered patients who have been discharged from hospitals is 184. 2 newly confirmed cases were reported today. The third COVID-19 related death was reported on the 3rd of April from the Imamul Aruz Mawata area at Maradana. The family members of the deceased were directed to the IDH hospital at Angoda, at which 5 of them tested positive for the virus. Thereafter, 302 persons from the area were sent to quarantine and the area was placed in isolation. The individuals completed their quarantine and returned to their homes, at which they underwent 14 days of self-quarantine. They completed their self-quarantine today and received the certificate confirming the completion of quarantine. The Imamul Aruz Mawata area in Maradana was taken out of quarantine today. Totally 6 COVID-19 positive patients were reported from this area. Beruala, Panila and Chana Fort, which were placed in isolation on the 14th of April, were taken out of quarantine today. The total number of COVID-19 positive persons reported from the Beruala area was 37. The Akurana Kandy area, which was placed in isolation on the 29th of March, was taken out of quarantine today. This was after 34 days. 7 COVID-19 positive patients are reported from the area, out of which 4 have recovered fully and returned to their homes. A COVID-19 positive patient reported from the Sudhavalla area in Jaila was discharged from hospital upon recovering recently. He was advised to undergo self-quarantine at home for a further 14 days. A news item was reported yesterday that within this period, this individual has suffered a relapse of the disease. The Director General of the Health Services, clarifying the situation, states that it is not a relapse of the disease. The Director General of Health Services, Dr. Anil Jasinghe, said OCR tests were conducted, or rather done, on 2 occasions after this individual had contracted the disease, and it is after the test results returned negative that he was discharged from the Mulariaba hospital. He further stated all discharged patients are advised to undergo 14 days of self-quarantine at home. Dr. Jasinghe clarified that within this 14-day period, this individual was admitted to the National Hospital of Sri Lanka due to a chest pain. However, the PCR testing done at this point with the Medical Research Institute returned positive. Dr. Jasinghe clarifies that actually there are 2 explanations for this result. One explanation is that a very low viral load can be present within a patient's system and it can vary. However, this does not mean that they are a group that spreads the disease. The second explanation is that dead RNA components have come under the laboratory analysis during the testing. He explains at this point the virus is not at an active position. Therefore, the Director General of Health Services clarifies that this individual has not suffered a relapse of the disease. He further adds the present condition of this patient is one of the 2 conditions that he explained. Dr. Jasinghe states the individual does not become a vector of the disease. However, he will be readmitted to hospital for investigations to be carried out. 15 COVID-19 positive patients were detected yesterday, out of which 12 persons were naval officers. 10 of them were Navy personnel who had been on leave, whilst the other 2 were naval officers attached to the Valisuri Navy camp. Another 3 patients were reported yesterday, and they were from amongst those who had close interactions with the infected Navy personnel. Within the past 24 hours, the highest number of COVID-19 deaths was reported from the United States. The number of deaths reported was 1,691. The United Kingdom reported 621 deaths, whilst Italy reported 474. In neighbouring India, 100 deaths were reported within the past 24 hours. The last COVID-19 death in Sri Lanka was reported on the 8th of April. No deaths owing to the disease have been reported in the country so far. Meanwhile, the PCR test results of 2 individuals who died at the Mullaitivu Quarantine Centre that is run by the Air Force were received. The test results have proved that the deaths were not caused by COVID-19 virus.
And that's a wrap of tonight's Primetime News. Until we meet again next time, do take care, stay safe and good night.
Good night.